Hello, fellow foodies. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Cassandra Quave, and you are listening to Foodie Pharmacology, the science podcast for the food curious. So, we've talked a lot about the health impact of a plant based or plant forward diet on the show. And while my own personal desire is for people to learn how to grow as many of their own foods as possible and cook and consume whole plants, the reality is that with our busy lives that we have today, many folks need a simpler solution for easy, fast meal prep and a healthier solution for meal prep. And this is where I think some exciting innovations in plant based foods can come into play. So, this week, we're going to dive deeper into this area of plant based meat substitutes. This is a really exciting space in the food industry, and it's experiencing a ton of rapid growth in the market. Our guest today is Jody Boyman. Jody is an entrepreneur and lifelong advocate for sustainable food practices, healthy eating, and animal welfare. She has a background in whole food, plant based nutrition, marketing, and sales. And as co founder and chief purpose officer of Hungry Planet, and fueled by the firsthand challenges of eating plant based since childhood and raising plant based children, she is bringing to market the first full range of chef crafted plant based meats that are delicious and nutritious. So it's great to have you on the show today, Jody. And I'm wondering if we can just start with maybe some of the basics. Like, can you tell us, what exactly are plant based meats?
So, plant-based meats are meats that just happen to be made directly from plants, and we have sort of disintermediated the animal from the equation. So we started out when we were developing them with four core sensory and health pillars. We wanted something that was sustainable, something that had great texture, that had fantastic taste, and of course was nutritious. This is very important to us. And then on top of that, we applied four key product design principles. So it had to handle, it had to prepare, it had to store, and it had to cook just like conventional meat. And it had to move through the entire supply chain like conventional meat does so that it would have easy adoption.
Cool. And so when you think about the whole span of animal meats, like what represents the largest share of the marketplace? I always think of chicken. Like we eat a lot of chicken. Is that the most common like meat protein or are there others? Like what are you working
Y-
towards substituting?
Yeah, so, we are Hungry Planet, not Hungry
Mhm.
St. Louis, where we're based, or Hungry Santa Barbara, where I am based. So we did look at the total addressable market globally, and we learned that actually pork accounts for
Hmm.
36%, and then poultry is next at 35%, and then beef follows that at only 22%, and then the
Wow.
other proteins are the remaining 7. So we realized it was much more than a beef and a burger play, which, some of the larger companies um, got involved with early on and started educating the market. But our company is much more than that. We are much more than a beef and burger play. And, we have come out with chicken and beef and pork and lamb and turkey and crab, breakfast sausage, Italian sausage, and chorizo so far.
Wow.
And in
That's
lots
quite
of
an array.
different form factors, right? So
Yeah.
it's not just one form factor. Some of them are grilled strips that are pre-cooked. Some of them are meatballs. We have Thai meatballs. We have pork gyoza. So it's plant-based
Mm,
pork inside of gyoza, and people love them. They're selling incredibly well.
that's fantastic. So, when I think about the variety of different proteins and kind of textures and flavors you're going after, the first thing that comes to mind is like, how do you achieve that? Like, are you using? I know some companies are using proteins based on soy, some are using pea. Like, what kinds of plants go into a plant based meat?
Yeah, so, different companies choose different plant proteins. We sampled, oh, we've gone through so many iterations over the years, and we landed on soy. We landed on non-GMO soy as,
Hmm.
our platform. Some of our meats, our white meats, have a little bit of non-GMO wheat in them as well. But as you know, you can get all the essential amino acids from plant foods, and all plant foods and all animal foods contain all of the essential amino acids. It just varies in proportions. So people get a little worried about that. But we did decide that that was going to be the best. It gives the best texture, the best flavor. It doesn't sort of have that aftertaste that pea protein can have. It also digests really well, so that, you don't feel any, bloating or whatever that some other proteins can give you. So, there's a lot of myths out there about soy, but we find that more and more people are choosing to eat it because they're learning that it is actually, heart healthy, that it's packed with, phytonutrients, and, it's just, high quality and has all the amino acids that we need. So it's rich in fiber, and it has iron, potassium, magnesium, and phosphorus. So those are all good things for us to have in our diets.
That's great. Well, I guess another question that the audience may be wondering about, we've heard in the news recently that there's some interest now in kind of lab grown meats. And lab grown meats are different from plant-based meats, right?
Yeah, they are. They're quite different. And I think, the reason that everybody's talking about them is because it's sort of the bright, shiny object right now. But it has considerable challenges around scaling and safety, and, it's potentially decades away from USDA, FDA approval. So, it's difficult to try to grow mammal cell cultures without antibiotics and
Yeah.
without fetal bovine serum, and it's certainly, as I said, that shiny object that VCs and visionaries who have perhaps haven't been as deeply immersed in this category as we have for as long. So what's frustrating for us is attracting all the funding, but we have the existing technologies today that are scalable today that could relatively quickly displace animal meat completely. And I think there was an article last week from Pat Brown, who was the founder of Impossible. And of course, he's famous for saying, let's displace all animal meat by 2035. And they are a plant based meat company like we are. They are not a lab grown company. So, it's possible. We just need to scale. We need the funding. We need to do it. We have the technology already available to us.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're saying is so true. Sometimes we get, especially in like kind of fast-paced venture capital, there's always interest around like the new shiny object in the room. But I mean, I grow mammalian cells in my lab. I can tell you they need fetal bovine serum and antibiotics to keep the culture, growing. So it is, I mean, it's an interesting idea, but I think we are pretty far away from like you said, the science and scale. Um, let's talk a bit more about the formulation of the plant-based foods because I think that's also kind of it's an interesting area of science with kind of food processing and food technology. And what can you share with us about what goes into getting these different animal like flavors and textures? Because you listed quite a number of things that taste like crab versus a pork sausage versus chicken.
Yeah.
I mean, I would
Yeah.
imagine that you've got to use very, an assortment of ingredients to achieve those textures and flavors. How does that all come together?
So we have a lot of it is trial and error. So Todd and I
Mhm.
self-funded this for a long time before we brought in chefs and scientists to try to work it out. So, you know, meat at its component parts is just protein plus fat plus flavor, right?
Mhm.
So, and then we decided on the platform of non-GMO soy and wheat to give us that mouth taste and texture, which was really important. And we also really wanted to make sure that our meats were healthy. As I said, zero cholesterol, hormones, or antibiotics. So we have very few ingredients. I wanted to say this about 10 in the
Okay.
case of our beef, which is about half of the total ingredients of other players in this space. All non GMO, packed with protein and fiber, half the calories, a fraction of the fat, saturated of conventional meat and other plant-based meats. And so a lot of it was trial and error. A lot of it is combining the ingredients. A lot of it is the temperature in which you do so, the order in which you do so, the pressure under which you combine them, all of that. So it's not rocket science, but it is very precise.
Very precise. Yeah, I can imagine. No. Yeah, that's a good point about pressure and temperature and order of ingredients, you know. Well, I mean, even if you're thinking about baking like a simple, cake or something, all those are important
Yes,
aspects, right? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to do it in the right order and a lot of trial and error. And then when our chefs get it right, they get so excited and the Slack channel lights up and it's like, guys, we have the new breakfast sausage and it's killer. And we
Oh,
got
that's
to
awesome.
demo it at Expo West. And so, yeah, that's
Oh,
what we
that's
do.
great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I was bummed I missed Expo West this year. It looked like it was an amazing meeting. Yeah.
It was, in previous years, there've been up to 90,000 people attendees
Wow.
there, which is kinda crazy. This year, they said there were about 60,000. It was actually our first year to have a booth,
Yeah.
and, we 3 of our chefs were there, and we had 9 people altogether, and oh my gosh, it was a beehive. It was so much fun to start telling our story, to consumers, but also, people who are brokers or, everybody who's anybody just shows up who loves food, who's interested in what's the new great thing. And
Yeah.
how are we gonna solve, climate change, with the foods we eat? I mean, that's becoming increasingly popular to look at it through that lens, and I know that's something that has definitely driven me, from a very young age. I could see this climate catastrophe on the horizon as a young child, actually, in the '70s. I was very, very concerned, and, it's just so empowering to know that the foods that we choose to eat have are the biggest input, that we have personally into creating, a better environment, right? And to reducing, for instance, our meats reduce greenhouse gases by 90%, water by 90%, and land about 70%, depending on the protein.
Mhm.
So, it's very compelling, especially for people who are my kids' age. I like to say I have skin in the game. I have 2 kids that I've raised plant-based, and they're very concerned about the world that we are bequeathing them, and they wanna know what they can do about it? So we find a lot of young people are very open to hearing our messaging and to going out and purchasing our meats.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The amount of land that we currently have dedicated globally towards raising some of these core crops, including soy, is like a major contributor to this. But the
Yes.
level of soy needed to grow a cow or a pig is different from the level of soy needed to make a direct food product. And so, yeah, reducing the amount of animal feed production would and land use by animals would be of great help, I think, to the environment.
Absolutely, and I get that a lot from people, "Well, why are you using soy? Soy is a monocrop, blah, blah, blah." Well, we are using soy, but it is domestically sourced, it is non-GMO.
Mhm.
When people look at the Amazon, and the deforestation happening there, something like, 90% of the soy grown is grown there, and it's grown to be fed to animals
Cattle.
who
Mhm.
are then fed more water and grazed on land and then shipped to slaughterhouses and then, turned into XYZ product. It's just not sustainable, right? So yeah, we do use soy, but again, it's non-GMO and domestically sourced.
Yeah. Great. Great. Well, I wanna get into some of the personal story because I think this is something interesting is like, as a founder of a business like this, like, how did this all come together? I know you co-founded with your brother, like, what was that journey like?
Yeah, well, the journey started out for me in rural Missouri, actually, in the 1970s. I'm one of 3 kids. My younger brother is my co-founder, and our younger sister is an OBGYN, and also plant-based and uses that, in her practice with her patients. And so in the '70s, you know, I would as a youngster during family dinners, I would, look at my plate and I would say, "Who did this used to be, mom?" Which was not very popular. And, I was that kid who would go out and, like, after a big rain, I'd go rescue the earthworms and put them back, into the grass, and dogs that were dumped on the rural county roads where we grew up, and birds that would fall out of nests and stuff. So I just sort of came into the world an animal lover and animal empath. And we had dogs and cats and bunnies and chickens and all of it. And then as I grew up, I really love this Dolly Parton quote. You've probably heard it. "Find out who you are and do it on purpose." And I'm like,
Nice.
"Okay, that's me. I'm gonna find out who am I." And then, I was also this nerdy kid that had all kinds of quotes taped to my wall, and one of them was from Chief Seattle, which is, "We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, but we borrow it from our children." And so, I was a wildlife photographer for many years. It was in Antarctica in the 1980s. And then I had another business. And then Todd, who's a very successful businessman in his own right, came to me and he said, "Hey, we're kind of embarking on the second half of our life here. What do we wanna do to meaningfully move the needle, on personal and planetary health?" Which ended up being our mission statement. And we were kind of casting about for, gosh, what should it be? And then it's like, "It's the
Nice.
food, stupid." Like, it is the lowest common denominator of human existence, right? If we're lucky, we all get to eat food 3 times a day or snack and have a little bit more. But that is the biggest single lever for change, and so that's sort of how we came about it, and we like each other a whole bunch. A lot of people think we're married, and I'm like, "No, gosh,
It's my
no.
brother.
I'm the older sister, can't you tell?" So, yeah, I just think there's so many unintended consequences, right, for our health and the environment and the animals with the food we eat, and we just wanted to have that conversation and build a bigger tent and invite more people in. And, our business is not for vegans and vegetarians. I've been eating plant-based, as I said, forever. So it's not really for me. It's
Mhm.
for the 95% of flexitarians out there who for health or environmental or animal welfare reasons wanna eat differently, wanna eat more plants, are plant curious, as you said earlier,
Yeah.
which is a great term, right? Because it's so inviting. And when you say to people, "So you're flexitarian," and then they go, "Oh, yeah, I am." It's like it sort of dawns on them and they love that term, and I'm like, "Well, welcome to Hungry Planet," "We are here for you."
That's
So,
great.
that's how it kind of all started, and Todd became plant-based, maybe 35 years ago, and, I was about 45 years ago, before I knew anybody that was, or before the term plant-based had been coined, or I didn't know the word vegan, nothing. I just was like, "I'm not eating animals anymore. I'm moving
Yeah.
on to plants." Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, so when you guys formed this, and then tell us about, I know you recruited a chef to help you build out the products. What was that process like? And kind of, I'm just curious, what's the supply chain development like? Like, how do you get products from concept phase into like product creation and then into stores?
So starting with the chef question, because we are a chef crafted company, and deliciousness comes first, followed by
Mhm.
nutrition, we realized that we needed to really build out our team of chefs. And we were at a food show on the East Coast, really early days, and Chef Ron DeSantis was sauntering by, and Todd said, "Excuse me, would you like to taste this crab?" And Chef Ron reached down, popped it in his mouth, and said, "Oh, that's delicious crab," and started walking away. And Todd was like, "Well, excuse me, that's plant-based crab." And Chef Ron, who was head of dining at Yale University at the time and had come from, I don't know, 30 years at the Culinary Institute of America, which is, the preeminent institute for learning about culinary skills. he was gobsmacked, and so he sort of backtracked and said, "What the heck are you people doing here, and why have I not heard about you before? And I wanna come work for you." We're like, "Well, it's just me and Todd right now, but okay, we'll let you know." So, Chef Ron has been great. As I mentioned before, we now have 5 full-time chefs, and we have lots of other chefs that, are influencers and work with us and work with our meats, but, it was really important to us that they be omnivores, right? That they come from a background in conventional meat and know what it tastes like, know
Yeah.
what it smells like, and for instance, our chief commercial officer, Brad Johnson, who I work very closely with on a daily basis, he grew up in Eastern Colorado on a sheep ranch.
Nice.
So they did not name their sheep because they had to eat their sheep, right? And now when we cook our lamb products, the chefs will walk down the hallway and I'll be in a Zoom with Brad, and Brad's head will crane around and this arm will reach in with something that is some beautiful lamb kebab or something. And he just stuffs it in his mouth and his eyes roll back in his head. He's like, "Oh, that tastes just like what I grew up with." Well, I, on the other hand, cannot even smell our lamb. Like, I go running the other direction. It has fooled dignitaries in the Middle East,
Wow.
who and even one person who loves lamb, is highly allergic to lamb. We told him, "This is plant-based lamb." He put it in his mouth, he started chewing, and he ran to the trash can and spit it out, and he, got all red, and he said, "I'm allergic to lamb. I there must be lamb in here. I'm gonna, I'm gonna die. I need my
Oh,
EpiPen."
no.
Yeah. So that's why we really went to chefs, right? Because it has to have the aromatics, it has to have
Yeah.
the texture, has to have the taste, all those things that we've talked about that create, adoption by the largest, range of people, not just early adopters like vegans and vegetarians like myself, because that's a very small pool of people. And then they want to move on. They want to go back to their whole food diet, which is pretty
Mhm.
much what I eat. Um, and you had another
Yeah.
question. Sorry, what was it?
Oh, yeah, and the question, so, well, to follow on to this before I jump to the next one was, so, like, for products like the lamb, is it sold like a kind of like a raw meat that you cook, or is it kind of like a pre-cooked, or is there a variety of options? Like, what is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for the lamb is different from a lot of our other meats. So right now it is just comes in a 5-pound chub. So it's in food service only
Mhm.
because there's not a lot of people in North America who would perhaps buy lamb on the retail side,
Mhm.
right? So, a lot of our business is, all of our meats, including our lamb, in 5-pound frozen chubs. All of our meats move through the supply chain frozen with an
Okay.
18-month, shelf life, which is pretty great. So here you're showing the Italian sausage, which is my personal favorite. I love to throw it into all kinds of things, including bolognese and lasagna, and just wrap it up in tortillas. It's absolutely delicious. So the lamb is just in ground, but we have a lot of different form factors for our meat. So we have raw patties, we have pre-cooked patties, we have grilled and roasted strips, which you're showing here. These are the chicken strips.
Mhm.
These also come diced. And then we have lots of ready to heat items that are, pre-cooked so they're super easy. For instance, with the chicken, you can just cut it, slack it out in the refrigerator and then cut it up and put it on a Caesar salad cold. You don't have to cook it up first, which is cuts out that step for people, during these very busy times. And then I mentioned we have the pork gyoza,
Mm.
which is selling really, really well at Sprouts and Albertson, Safeway, and other markets across the country. And nobody else really has that right now. We did sample that at Expo West, and those just flew off the counter.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, those are so tasty.
So what's your vision for the company? I mean, when did you guys found, first of all? How many years ago was it?
So, we were, as I mentioned, we were self-funded for many, many
Mhm.
years before we sort of started to professionalize. So we like to put the marker out there at about 2015
Mhm.
when the writing became on the wall and was on the wall and we started thinking, okay, it might be time to step into this more fully and, take it from sort of a side hustle to something that was front and center and 100-hour weeks for,
Yeah.
years actually. You know how that is. So, um, yeah, we've grown. We're about 40 employees now. We've got a lot of people on the operations side who are actively working on supply chain issues. I'm sure you've heard that supply chain is broken. It
Mhm.
was challenging before COVID 2 years ago, and it is absolutely a wreck right now. And so we have highly talented people who have lots of experience in food that we've been able to bring on board because our background isn't in food. It's in wanting to change the world through food. And so you realize, where your deficiencies are and you bring those people on board and it's such a great team and we are making such great progress together.
That's awesome. So what stores, what's your distribution situation like right now, and where do you think you're going with it?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to say that you've heard of spins data, probably. A lot of us in the retail sector pay a lot of attention to the spins data to sort of know how we're performing in the market, right?
Mhm.
And so it turns out that we actually have the most successful launch of a plant-based meat brand in terms of velocity and distribution in the past 2 years, which is
Great.
really exciting because we only have raised $25 million to date, and some of our competitors have raised 100, 150, 200 million, and they're often single threaded. They just do chicken, for instance, whereas we
Mhm.
have 9 proteins. So you
Yeah.
you can find us in all the Sprouts locations. There's about 362 Sprouts. We're in Albertsons and Tom Thumb and Randall's in the southern US. And we've recently added hundreds of Albertsons in Northern California. We're now in Hawaii. We're in Seattle. We're in Food Bazaar on the East Coast. And we're available in Costco and Amazon. But our big announcement coming up, and I probably shouldn't say this, Todd might get mad, but we are moving into the Weiss markets. It's about 200 markets on the East Coast. And the very cool thing about it is that they are taking 11 of our retail SKUs, which is phenomenal. I mean, if you can get, a retailer to take 2, you're
Mm,
doing really great, and if 3 is kinda hitting it out of the park. So, to take
that's great.
11 is fantastic, and it gives you that nice billboard, so when you're walking by, you see it and you get attracted to it, you come up and take a look, and that's when you see this incredible variety.
That's amazing. Well, like, as you're speaking, I'm thinking of something that, I tell my students every year. I teach a course called Food, Health, and Society, and I try to challenge them to think about how can they make the planet a better place? How can you improve human and planetary health? And, one of the things that I try to encourage is also, um, innovation. And so for all the students that, are out there that might be thinking, you know what, someday I wanna maybe think about launching a new food product. I've really been pushing entomophagy for a lot of them. Like, I'm waiting on the next great bug burger to come out because I think it's a very exciting area of, it's still very much in its infancy, I think, in terms of, like, of spread in the West, but I don't know, just as in terms of alternate proteins, but whether it's plant or insect or whatever kind of
Yeah.
source, like, what advice do you have for people that are interested in kind of thinking about how do they innovate in this space? Because we're going to need more innovation. The current, status quo of just, decimating our remaining tropical forests to
Oh,
grow animal feed is not okay. We can't
yeah.
do that in the long haul. So we need better solutions for plant-based or insect-based or other more sustainable based, low water consuming
Mhm.
solutions. So what would you tell that kind of student or that kind of person based on your experience?
Yeah, well, you know first of all, I would say that just coming from food, that food is humankind's, biggest common denominator, right? And so thus it is our biggest opportunity for positive change. And
Mhm.
the thing that catches me up, and I'm sure you know the statistic too, but somehow we manage to feed 80 billion land animals per
Wow.
year. And yet we cannot feed the nearly 8 billion, human family members that we have. A lot of starvation globally, right? And
Mhm.
so we have enough food. We just need to be feeding it directly to ourselves and not running it through animals first. So I don't know. I think it's a really exciting time right now because there are so many incredibly intelligent, creative, thoughtful people who are starting to meaningfully step into this gigantic opportunity and this challenge with their skills and their expertise. And, the younger generations have inherited this massive problem. So I think they're highly motivated, probably more than I was even as a kid, to solve for these things. So again, I think you find where your passion is, and you surround yourself with people who are also interested in solving those kinds of problems. It's really cool when you can have a co-founder, whether it's a sibling or a spouse or just another scientist that you've come into contact with. There's lots and lots of companies that have started that way, and then, you have to identify the problem, right? What is the
Mm.
problem you're trying to solve? And then just really focus on it and bring all your learning and your passion, your enthusiasm, your intelligence, your emotional intelligence to bear on it. And keep moving forward one step after the next because it's a heavy lift. I mean, there is no question. Our system is so broken right now, it's so cruel and inefficient, and it can't continue the way it is.
Yeah.
Like I think I read that if we all eat like North Americans eat, we would need 5 Earths. That's crazy. We can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing this. This is like it's been really interesting to see, you know, how this industry is evolving and exciting to see such a variety of products coming out. And I've got to head over to Sprouts and try some of your products. I have a Sprouts in my neighborhood. I
Oh,
can visit.
good.
Yeah. So thanks so
Good.
much for coming on the show.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And, if you follow us on social media, we make all kinds of cool announcements all the time, and we have giveaways and stuff too. And, at Hungry Planet Foods. So if you follow us there, we would love to have you join our growing community and help spread the word about our delicious and nutritious plant based meats.
Awesome. You've been listening to Foodie Pharmacology, the science podcast for the food curious. I want to send a shout out of thanks to our producers, Rob Cohen and Christine Roth. And thank you to you, our listeners who tune in every week. Stay healthy out there, and I'll see you next time.